Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Great River Rapport workshop. This one is in partnership with Watersheds Canada. So we are currently here in Long Sault in Ontario at a waterfront property. So we will be looking at the property, conducting a property assessment, and sort of making recommendations on how to better the relationship of the property, the waterfront property, with the St. Lawrence River. So the waterfront properties are fantastic, but they do have a very important relationship which has a direct impact to the health of the river. And so there's different things that we can do to better this relationship. And our wonderful partners here with us today from Watersheds Canada will be telling all about this. So we're joined today with Monica and with Chloe from Watersheds, and I will pass it over to them.
So I'm Monica, I'm the Communications and Fundraising Coordinator at Watershed Canada, and I'm here with Chloe, who is our Natural Edge Program Manager. And if you don't know about our organization, we're a national nonprofit based in Perth, which is about an hour from Ottawa. And we're really focused on delivering with local community partners and local individuals to protect their rivers, lakes, and shoreline. So we're going to be highlighting that today, talking about all the different things that we look for in a site visit. So we have kind of two different site visits that we'll be tackling. I'll be talking about our Love Your Lake program and what we look for when we do those assessments. And then Chloe will be talking about the Natural Edge program and what she looks for when she's at someone's property and how the property owner can make their property more environmentally friendly, or if they're looking to address certain problems that they're protecting against erosion, those sorts of things. So we're going to start with just a general overview of what the Love Your Lake program is. So it's an education and stewardship program that's coordinated between Watersheds Canada and the Canadian Wildlife Federation. It was first piloted in 2013, and so what we did is we piloted it in Eastern Ontario, and then we packaged it and spread it across Canada. So this summer we've been able to deliver it in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and Nova Scotia. And so what happens is local community partners like a lake association or a nature group are able to get local training and protocols and training videos and be able to actually regionally deliver. So we piloted and packaged it and then shared it with them. So when those people are trained for the Love Your Lake program, they go out on a boat and they assess every single property on that lake. And the reason they're doing that is they're looking for different factors on the land that will influence the water. So it's really an important balance between the land and the water. We want to make sure that what we're doing on land is helping the water and the wildlife that live there. We're protecting that lake quality that we all care about very much, and that's the reason we go to the lake. And so we are able to go through a standardized protocol and assess each property, and then provide them with an individualized report. So it comes with a lot of different voluntary recommendations they can take to protect their waterfront. So we'll be talking about some of those things based on the property we're at today. And we're just really thankful to the River Institute and also to our landowner for organizing this and for her to volunteer her property. So we're going to start over here. So there are two different things going on here. The first you can see is this giant fence, and then the second are these hardened steps behind us. So we'll start with the hardened steps. If you go really close to the steps, you'll see that there's a line of erosion right behind the hardened surface. So this is quite common with hardened and impervious surfaces like concrete retaining walls or concrete steps that are actually in the ground. And this is because there's nowhere for the water to go. So if it's not able to infiltrate into the ground, it kind of just pools onto the sides of the steps and will actually scour away your sediment. So if you think about in the spring, if you have spring flooding, the water is pulling out and that wave action is scouring your shoreline. Or if you think about it in a heavy rainstorm, the water is pooling on the sides of the hardened surface, and really it speeds up and picks up sediment and brings it down into the water. So this is going to be one of the areas that we kind of recommend the property owners naturalize, so they can have some plants right behind the hardened surface, and that way it's going to protect this area from further erosion. So those plants, like shrubs and trees, have really long root structures, and they're going to be able to protect and kind of hold the shoreline together so that it's protected and doesn't further erode. The second thing that's here is this large mesh fence. And so after talking with the property owner, we found out that this was because they're finding a lot of geese are coming up on their property, and they're using these fences as a deterrent. So this is pretty common for a lot of waterfront property owners to have large open areas of lawn that the geese are very happy to come up to, because the geese feel very safe here. They know that there aren't any predators coming around because they can see sometimes for miles ahead of them. And so they feel very safe here, and they just kind of hang out on people's properties, which most people don't really like. So native plants are another great solution for this, because the geese will not feel as safe if they have obstacles around them, like medium-sized trees or shrubs, and they aren't able to see around that. They're less apt to come onto that property because they don't feel as safe. So we'll just go around this fence. So right behind me is this large strip, and this is an area that the landowner told us they are leaving natural. So this is really wonderful for us to see already, before we've even talked to them, that they have nature in mind on their property, that they're really looking to protect their waterfront property. But this area is also very important for different wildlife, and also to protect the shoreline. So the property owner told us that they are just letting this be. These are all different native species or natural species to the area, and they're just letting it grow. So that's really wonderful for us to see. And as time goes on, this area will be protected more from things like wave action or ice push, because it has those native plants protecting it. One thing they did mention to us that they're seeing on their lake is a lot of Eurasian milfoil. So this is an invasive species. And this is something that the Love Your Lake program can help assess. So the people that are trained in the boats to assess each property are trained to recognize common invasive species such as milfoil, purple loosestrife, or zebra mussels. And some lake associations, they already know they have those species, they already know it's a problem, but others might not know that certain areas of the lake have those species, or that they have them at all. So the Love Your Lake report is really great at helping to identify those different species and giving recommendations on how to stop the spread of those species, and also what lake associations can do as a whole. So maybe there's a pilot project they can do to try and reduce the amount of that population, or doing like education webinars and things like that, so that their residents know how to recognize these species. So in the case of Eurasian milfoil, it is very tricky to get rid of, and there are some lake associations in Eastern Ontario that are trying out different pilot projects to see if they can get rid of them. So we always encourage lake associations to kind of share the work that they're doing and network with each other, so that they can help share the lessons they're learning or what is or isn't working. We'll continue over. Here we have kind of this retaining wall, looks like maybe a crib dock, that is starting to fail. So this is something that the current property owners inherited when they got the property. It wasn't something they brought in themselves, but they are kind of letting the crib dock live out the rest of its life, and there's not much that can be done at this point. But something that the Love Your Lake reports will recommend is that when these property owners are looking at changing the dock that they have, so when they have to take it out, there are more environmentally friendly options compared to the crib dock. So things like a cantilever dock, a pipe dock, or a floating dock can be really wonderful for the lake community, allowing access of wildlife underneath it and also water flow, rather than again having that hard surface like we talked about with the steps. So this is something that, you know, is just a wait in progress, and something that the Love Your Lake program can help them know about for the future. So it's about actions that they can take on their own property sort of right away, where they might be looking at native plants like Chloe's going to talk about, or it can be more long-term things that they can do to make their property more environmentally friendly. So we'll just head up these rocks here. So something else that these property owners have talked about is really important to them is wildlife habitat. So there are many different things that people can actually just let be on their property to be more conducive to wildlife. So this shoreline area, the first 30 meters or so, is very important to wildlife. It supports about 90% of aquatic species and 70% of land-based species at some point in their life, which we've all probably had the opportunity to see. We have turtles coming up on the water and nesting. We might see different pollinators in a meadow or along wildflowers. We also have things like waterfowl. It's a really critical part of the ecosystem for them. And it's also important for things like fish, where they might have shade or protection from predators in the water. So some different habitat structures that you might see on your property and just not realize quite the benefit they have are things like aquatic and terrestrial logs. So if you think about a tree falling into the water when it dies, or if you have branches that break off in a storm, if it's safe to do so, we really encourage you to leave those be. These are really important habitat for fish and turtles and macroinvertebrates especially, and it gives them some shade and protection from the hot sun and also from other predators. You can also have things like cavity trees, so these are really important for woodpeckers, of course at the beginning to get food, but then those holes are used for small birds, small mammals to nest and rear their young. You can also look at things like large trees that have overhanging vegetation, so different branches provide again that shade and protection, but it's also a benefit to landowners as those branches provide protection from things like wave action. So the water is going to be hitting those branches first rather than the shoreline where it might promote some erosion and scouring of the banks. I will now pass it off to Chloe, who's actually going to do a Natural Edge mini site visit. So we've already done some work ahead of time with the landowner, but she's just going to be going through the process of the Natural Edge.
Thanks, Monica. Yes, hi, I'm Chloe. I'm the Natural Edge Program Manager. And basically what our Natural Edge program is it's a shoreline naturalization and restoration program. And basically we work with landowners to design a natural shoreline for them, but it's also still functional for their lifestyle. So a lot of people think that when we come in and you're naturalizing and just planting that they're going to lose their view or they're going to use their water access. And this isn't the case at all. This is why we really like to work with people to design it so that their views are protected, they still have their water access, but they're still getting the benefits of having a natural shoreline. So Monica spoke a lot about erosion and how great plants are for protecting our soil and just stabilizing our shorelines. So working with landowners, we get to choose between different shrubs, wildflowers, and trees that are suitable for their shorelines. I'm just going to give an example. So you've seen most of this shoreline here and how fairly open it is, and it's basically just like a manicured lawn. So when you're wanting to naturalize your shoreline, the first thing you're going to want to do is just think through your shoreline and how you want to use it. Our general rule is to keep 25% of your shoreline for yourself, and this is going to be your access points, your seating areas, things like that, where you typically will put a boat in or store it off on the side. And then you're going to want to give about 75% of your shoreline back to nature. So looking at this and talking with the landowner ahead of time, we've already gone through and pointed out the areas that she would like to leave open and the areas that she's fine to bring in different plants. So like looking off to the side here, we have a beach area, which they obviously still want to keep, still want to use, but there is some erosion happening up along the top. So we want to put in low flowering shrubs, maybe an additional tree in order to stabilize this shoreline here. But we're still going to leave their access points. So talking with her, she wants to leave it kind of by this tree. So in the plan, we're going to put in plants all the way around and then leave that access point. And then we're going to start up with the planting again. And then down here going out towards this dock, she's wanting some low flowering shrubs and some wildflowers along each side. one thing that that's really great is that this landowner is already leaving this rocky area natural. So she's letting whatever comes in to just kind of move in and start growing and stabilize the shore. So we're going to be focusing on this top part where this lawn is. So I'm just going to quickly show you one thing that you'll want to do to help choose which plants that will be on your shoreline is to do a soil sample. So you can see here, this is right up where we want to be planting. And this is a soil auger, but anybody can do this with a shovel. That's no issue. And you just want to dig a hole to see what type of soil you have. So you can actually see here, looking in the hole, how there are barely any roots where the grass is. So when grass is kept short, it's not given that chance to really grow. So its roots aren't going to be growing that deep into the ground. So that's about it. So really there's nothing holding on to this soil beneath it. So whenever waves come up and hit the shoreline, or if there's a heavy rain that's just hitting this lawn, it's more likely to start to erode and start to break up that soil. So basically this is all you need to do. There are a lot of tests online to figure out which type of soil you have. You don't have to be too specific. We basically look for if it's more sandy, if there's clay or loam, and a humus. So there's different tests you can look online, but here I'm going to say it's more of a sandy loam. You can see all the bigger sand particles in there. And we're going to use this information to help us choose what native species we want to bring in. So anyone who has a shoreline property can go and start choosing different native plants that they want to bring onto their shoreline. We actually have a database online. It's at naturalize.watersheds.ca, and it's a native plant database that can help you choose different plants. So first thing you're going to want to know is what your hardiness zone is. So our database is based off of these hardiness zones. Down here I believe we are in 6B. But you can look up on our website and you can go in on a map and choose your hardiness zone. From there, that's where you're going to enter in your other site conditions. So your soil type, whether it's a sand, a loam, or a clay, your soil moisture level. So here it's fairly dry. If you're more by a marsh, you could have a wetter area. So that's a big factor in choosing plants. And then you're also going to want to look at sunlight availability. There's either sun, shade, or partial shade. Here, obviously very sunny, so those are going to be her conditions. And then from there, you can just go in and start filtering through the different plants that it provides. And an additional factor that you can put in is the size of the plant, so which height. Because obviously you're going to want to protect your view. So we know here that along the front, she wants this to be kept lower so that you can still see the water, see kids swimming. And then we have a farther section that's not really a big view, not one of their main views. So we're going to go taller there with different types of tall flowering shrubs to bring in great habitat to attract birds, pollinators, things like that. So from here, basically working with the landowner, I start to design a plan, and we have our Naturalize app that we've developed, and it basically allows us to design a plan on site with the landowner. So they get to help choose which plants from the database they'd like us to include, where the placement would be, and things like that. That way they know exactly where the pathway is going to be and exactly where each plant is going to be placed. So using our Naturalize app, we can design our shoreline restoration plans with the landowner on site. For this one, you can see how we've already taken the photos for it. And then we'll just go in and enter in our site conditions, which for moisture, it would be dry, it's a sandy loam, full sun. The depth, it's fairly deep here, so we can put potted stock in as well as bare root. Bare root is just a smaller form of stock where they're lifted in the spring and there just isn't any soil around the actual root system of it. And we can also use wildflowers here. So for this section, they wanted to keep it fairly low. So we're also going to be putting in a maximum height of 1.5 meters. And from there, it's going to go through our database and choose plants based on those site conditions. So we can now go through and pick, say, black-eyed Susan, bush honeysuckle, butterfly milkweed. I always love to include different types of milkweed to help with our monarch butterfly populations, and various things like that. So now once we have our plants chosen, we can actually go through and start drawing out our compartment and placing the actual species. So that's just a general overview of our app and how it works. Once the plan is designed, then we actually send a PDF to the landowner so they have some time to look it over as well before finalizing it. Next, I'm just going to show you, we're actually going to walk along the shoreline here. Monica mentioned a lot about erosion, and so this is actually, they have a nice big kind of seating area, which we're going to naturalize just behind it, because as you can see, there's a bit of erosion already starting to occur. So we want to kind of nip that in the bud and fix it now and get some plants started. So talking to the landowner, she just wanted a couple access points so we can actually fill in with plants, and just even coming out to about a couple feet, because right behind us we actually have a fire pit. So we don't want to bring plants too close to the fire pit. So here we'll start it as a fairly shallow buffer, and then we can extend it out towards that tree, and it'll just be planted all the way along, but we will leave those pathways in place. When naturalizing, I also like to just do a quick measurement of the length of the shoreline. This is just a measuring wheel, and just running it along. And this gives a good idea about how many plants you'll actually want to include. Our rule of thumb is to have a plant for every 1 to 2 square meters of shoreline that you're restoring. For trees or larger shrubs, you can have them further apart, but for wildflowers, you'll want to plant them fairly densely so that they'll fill in the area quickly. And then I'm just going to take you to the last section and talk about what we're going to do in that area. So here, where Monica started, and we have the steps, and they have this barricade for the geese. This is where we're going to put in some larger shrubs as well. Because we already have a garage here and it's not a main viewpoint for them, they're happy to go with taller shrubs and trees. One thing that was important to them was to try and bring in some fruiting species, and particularly things that are edible. So we're looking at bringing in raspberries and blackberries, as well as like a Canadian serviceberry. So all of these plants will actually grow really nicely here. They'll get nice and big, but they'll also provide some fruits for them to eat over time. So I think that's it for the natural edge, but I'll actually pass it back over to Monica just to go over our resources that we have available for any landowners to use to improve their waterfront.
Thank you, Chloe. So one of the resources that we really wanted to highlight is the Lake Protection Workbook. So I have the hard copy with me, but it's actually available for free download as a PDF. And this was created by the Lake Links Planning Committee. So Lake Links is an annual workshop. It's usually held in Perth, but of course these past few years we've transitioned to online. So it's really open to anyone across Canada. It's a really great education and networking event for different lake groups, river groups, nature groups to connect with each other, learn about the different issues that are happening on their water bodies and how they can help each other out with different projects. So this specific Lake Protection Workbook was developed by that committee, which is made up of members from conservation authorities, different lake groups, and charities. And so it's kind of like a report card, if you will, for your property. So you go through different sections of your property, sort of like Chloe and I have done today. You look at different wildlife habitat availability, things like light pollution or your septic system, and you're grading them on a scale. Usually it's between 0 and 4. And so for each section, you're tallying it up And then at the end, there's different ranges that can tell you how your property is doing. So you can see if there's certain areas where you received a lower score, maybe that's a priority for you to look into different solutions. Or if you're doing really well across the board, then you know that anything you keep doing is just even more amazing. So it's a really nice snapshot of your property, and it's something that you can do yourself. So depending on whether you do it by yourself or as a family, we say that it takes about 20 to 30 minutes to complete, and it's really easy to follow. There are a lot of pictures and background information as to why you might receive a certain score for a certain feature on your property, and it also talks about some of the science behind it. So for example, light pollution is in here. It talks about how light pollution is very disruptive to wildlife and the different cycles they have, like migration. And it gives specific suggestions on ways that you can reduce your light pollution on your property. So there are lots of different chapters in this book. We recommend it to everyone. Again, it's a free download on our website, and you can visit our website at watersheds.ca/resources. There are lots of natural edge resources there as well, such as a wildflower garden guide and a shoreline habitat creation manual. And of course, if you would like to join Lake Links this year, it is on Saturday, October 23rd at 10 a.m. Eastern via Zoom, and you can come hang out with Chloe and I and lots of different great organizations across Eastern Ontario and really Canada at this point, who are all working to protect their local freshwater areas. So we'd like to say thank you again to the River Institute for hosting this workshop, to our wonderful landowner for having her property, and again, if you have any questions for us, you're always welcome to email us at info@watersheds.ca. Thank you.
So if you have any questions on this workshop, please feel free to drop them in the comment section below, and any links provided or spoken about, we will be putting into the description section. So thanks again, and we'll see you for our next Great River Rapport workshop.